What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the Devy YouTube channel. We're back with another edition of our Top 25 series. This is going to be my favorite one. We're talking about my Michigan Wolverines, diving into what their outlook is going to be. They had a dreamlike season last year that ended on a very sour note against TCU. We'll get into that a little bit. But they had a great year. They beat that team that shall not be named twice in a row. It wasn't a fluke. How do you like that, Buckeye fans out there? And they're bringing back a lot of people and a lot of good talented people. So we're going to dive into their offense, their defense, their schedule, just go over it all for you guys here. Hit that like and subscribe button while the intro is going, and we'll dive into the Michigan Wolverines. All right, let's get into Michigan, baby. Let's talk about them. Last year, it wasn't a fluke. They went 13-1. Their offense was really good. They were sixth in the nation last year, 40 points per game, which is kind of unheard of. That was that rushing attack. Then opponents' points per game, they were seventh in the country too. So you're looking at seventh out of 131. So they were really good on both sides. Obviously, in that TCU game, they lost 51-45. There were some questionable calls in that one, but Harbaugh's got him back. And JJ McCarthy kind of stepped up towards the end of the year last year when Blake Corum got injured. We saw Corum have over 1,400 yards, and we know Donovan Edwards stepped up last year. So this team was really good. I mean, this team should have played for a national title. They lost in the playoff, and that was definitely a sour taste in their mouth, but they're back. Hey, they got everybody getting going. So let's dive into that offense. Let's look at that offensive line. What can we expect from this team? This offensive line won the Moore Award 2 years in a row. So for outstanding offensive line. So do you think that can be a third year, Christian?
Yes. So they're returning three guys, Trevor Keegan, Zach Zinter, and Carson Barnhart. They're bringing in Drake Nugent and Ladarius Henderson. So they hit the transfer portal. They lost Olu Oluwatimi and Ryan Hayes. And those are two good players. I think Olu at times was the anchor behind that rushing attack. And so when you look at what this offense needed, it's someone to fill that role. I think he moved pretty well. Drake Nugent is that dude. I really think that he can be that guy. He played really well at Stanford last year, and Stanford likes to run the ball as well. So I think when you look at the guys that they brought in, as long as they gel, I think that this offensive line could be as good, if not better, than last year, which is crazy to say because this offensive line has been the thing that has kept them going on offense for the last 2 years.
Yeah, let's be clear. Like, JJ get a little love. Corum gets the love. Haskins got the love. This offensive line is really what drives this team, and that's what's driven it the last couple of years. And those awards are what shows you that. I think getting Nugent and Henderson are huge. I think them getting those guys and going out and really attacking the portal is, again, the difference between like a Michigan and a Clemson, where Clemson didn't do that on their offensive line, where Michigan's like, no, we're going to go get guys. And so I think there's some nuance there with that. I think Harbaugh knows what he's doing there. When you're looking at the offense, I think the big thing is can JJ take that next step at that quarterback position? He had 2,700 yards last year, 22 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. I broke down a video on him talking about maybe he could be that Matthew Stafford type mold in college. So go check that out. Will he step up? What is that going to look like? Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. Corum coming off the surgery on his knee. Donovan Edwards coming back, who could be one of the most underrated backs in the country. They have a really stacked running back room, though. Stokes, Dunlap, Cabana, and then Hall. All those guys are really good. The question always is the wide receiver room. We've kind of talked about Andrew Anthony moving on and those guys there. Cornelius Johnson is still back. Roman Wilson, who's a really good slot receiver, is there. Darius Clemens, some of these other guys. And then they probably have one of the best Big Ten tight ends in Colston Loveland. Really performed well last year. Really is kind of like that next guy of that room after Luke Schoonmaker left. What do you think of this team? Is it going to be live and die with the running, or we see a little bit more balanced attack?
I think it'll be a little more balanced. I think, especially early on, depending on Corum's health. Now, it's been quite a few months, but I don't think we'll see him ramp up to full participation until, mid-season even. So I think that they'll go a little pass heavier early in the year, which I think will help them down the stretch. Because I think when you look at the game at the end of the year last year, I think JJ kept them in the game, but also threw them out of the game at times. And so what you don't want is that exact same situation. If they make the playoff, they need JJ to be the guy that can go out there and win the game. And I think JJ has that ability. We've talked about JJ quite a bit over the last couple of years, but he's got all the tools to go do that. I would be remiss not to mention that he is Dane Brugler's QB3 in
Yeah.
summer scouting. So the draft community is pretty high on JJ, and there are reasons for that. Donovan Edwards might get some work as a receiver, I think, when Blake Corum gets back, just to keep them on the field at the same time. I think those are your two best players. Colston Loveland, I watched like one game of his last year and I was like, oh, this kid's going to be like a fantastic, maybe round one tight end,
Yeah.
just with his pass catching abilities. So, yeah, I mean, I think this offense, you have all of these guys coming back. I think you're looking at an improvement from what was already one of the better offenses in the country.
Yeah, and let's be clear, like Donovan Edwards is probably their best pass catcher. If I was looking at it, easily their best pass catcher. And I do think Edwards and Stokes can kind of carry this offense, this running back room. If Corum doesn't cut back right away, Dunlap too. I think Stokes is underrated. I think he's a big kid, 220, can move. He's that guy like kind of like a Haskins type role there. So I do think they play well off of each other there. So that would be really good in terms of what that. And I do think it's going to be more balanced. I really do think it's going to be like that. When we're looking overall like their losses, we have Luke on here. I put Jake Moody. You got to put my boy Moody up there. Got to give a kicker some love out here. Although he did miss a kick in preseason, got to stop that. Olu, yeah, we talked about him. Ryan Hayes, Ronnie Bell. I look at Ronnie Bell as almost being kind of like that veteran guy that was in that room and really just helped them. And I think that was really what his veteran presence was there. I do think him leaving may help because they're not just going to be able to target Ronnie Bell all the time. So I do think there's something like, hey, they're going to have to move the ball around a little bit more. But overall, these are their losses, not huge fundamental losses. Offensive line, they shored up at the transfer portal.
Yeah, I just think back a couple of years ago, Ronnie Bell was set for like this incredible year. And that injury kind of knocked him out. I think that was week 1. And then he came back and he was fine last year. And he got drafted and he's teammates with Jake Moody out in San Francisco. But yeah, this is a good group. But we just talked about, I kind of think that they're in a better spot this year,
Yeah.
without some of these guys even. So notable. But once again, they just plug and play. And I think they're in good shape.
Yeah, no, 100%. They're fine. When you're looking at the recruits wise, Michigan's done a pretty good job with recruiting. I think the thing is, like, they have a top 8 class for 2024. 2023, it was number 20 overall. Composite was 17. They really spread it around Midwest kind of recruiting, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, that area. They'll get a couple California kids. When you look at overall as who their best guys are, Cole Cabana is a guy 6'1", 180. At that spot, he looks good. 4-star kid coming in. He's going to kind of play that pass catching role as well. Sam McGuffey rings a bell to us Michigan fans. We get a little nervous when we hear that name, and Cole makes me a little nervous. But Amir Herring, offensive tackle, 6'3", 300. You're always going to see that with these classes. But overall, a solid class. Benjamin Hall is a guy I really like. I love Benjamin Hall as a running back. I touted him last year. We had some analysts talk about like, oh, well, you got bench in high school. No one cares about that. He's talented. He's going to get on the field. He looked really good in the spring game. But overall, solid class. But on the offensive side, you're never going to see big time recruits like you do in the 24 class right now.
I have hot takes about Cole Cabana. I think he's one of the best running backs in this class, man.
You do? Good. I like it.
I haven't really put those out there even for our Patreon because I think certain few people in our Discord would make fun of me for that. But I think he's a really versatile running back, and maybe that has to translate into being a slot receiver down the road. But I think his pass catching ability is just outstanding. And then Carmelo English is another guy that I liked in this cycle. So I think they did a good job. Like you said, it's a little bit of a down year technically, but I think they put a lot of resources into that 2024 class, going out and getting a quarterback, things like that. So good class.
I just feel like, come on, give me a wide receiver out here that makes like gets on the field and goes. Like Carmelo could be that guy, when you're looking at that. Early enrollees on this field, Samaj Morgan, Frederick Moore, they were early enrollees. So that's something to note. Like, hey, maybe they'll get out there a little bit earlier. But yeah, overall, Deacon Tonale is probably the best, the tight end, 6'6", 215. He'll redshirt. He'll be a stud next year. Like that's usually the Michigan way. But yeah, I like the Cabana take though. Like I think I just get nervous about that profile. And plus the Michigan, bias in me a little bit, like get nervous. But I think, hey, if he can be that, he can be Donovan Edwards. Like I look at Hall and Cabana as that. Edwards and Corum, that type of, or Haskins, that type of different kind of runner. Key transfers. So we know these guys, Miles Hilton's coming in. When you're looking at him as a prospect, you have Ladarius Henderson, Drake Nugent, AJ Barner as well. That's someone to kind of note on the tight end side. He's coming over from Indiana. I think gives them good depth, and they're going to want to use multiple tight end sets at Michigan. I really like Barner. Didn't really necessarily produce too much at Indiana, but 6'6", 250, big kid, offense. When you're thinking of you're thinking of run blocking, those type of things. AJ kind of stands out to me.
Yeah, I think that's a good get because, like I mentioned with Loveland, I think he's a great pass catcher, but I think that there are certainly areas of his game that he needs to get better at. Blocking would be one of those, and I think Barner will get on the field to kind of, keep this rushing attack as elite as it was last year.
Yeah. And Miles Hilton is just someone to know. He's coming from Stanford as well, 6'6", 308. He's a great backup to have. Like he's just one of those guys going to be plug and play if they need to. And right now he's probably projected as a backup, but that's someone to note. Impact players though, JJ, it's JJ. It's JJ world out here. And I think we live and die by JJ McCarthy this year. I think we beat Ohio State because of JJ, in my opinion, and because he outplayed Stroud on that field, I think, and just in those big plays that he had. JJ to me was the guy that kind of stepped up. And now what does that look like, that development? How's that quarterback coach, the offensive system going to come play? Are they going to open it up a little bit? Will his downfield accuracy get better? Like, to me, that's the big thing with JJ. And how does he spread the ball around? You have Corum, Edwards, and Wilson there. I like all those guys, but this team's going to live and die with JJ McCarthy. And I think that's just how it's set up.
You heard it here first. JJ McCarthy better than CJ Stroud. No caveats. No, I think you're right though. I think this has to be JJ's year, and I think it's been a while since we had a Michigan quarterback that this many people were excited about, and yeah. I think it's an exciting time to be a Michigan fan. I also, he needs to get better, and so we need to see it this year, and I think we will. But it certainly this team will live and die with JJ's success or failure.
Yeah, and I think some people that talk about like JJ laughing about him being like the number 3 quarterback in his class. It's not unheard of that could be like a thing. Like I really think JJ is talented. Like he's probably one of the more talented. He has a chance to go down as the best quarterback of this century on Michigan ever. Like just in terms of what he could do this year, leading to playoff last year and everything there. So if you see the production, he could be right there. Roman Wilson's also another guy. And as far as like NFL prospect, Edwards to me is the best NFL prospect on this roster, on this offensive side. So like that's someone obviously to note. All right, let's go to the defensive side. Michigan's always had a really good defense the last couple of years, and really where their strength has been is their edge. Like their edge, we've talked about all these guys. Their edge rushers is really where it's at. I think for the first time this year, I've seen in a while, the Wolverines might be stronger on the interior than their edge, and that's something to kind of note as you look there. And they have playmakers all over this field.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I also think that the secondary is probably the strongest group here. Mm-hmm. With Will Johnson, the kid is one of the best young corners I've ever watched. Remarkable film from last year. You talk about the 2 returning safeties. I think they're in good shape. Mike Sanders still, transitioning from wide receiver last year to be a fantastic corner, making big plays in championship games and things like that. So I think this secondary is probably the best that I've seen from them in the last few years. The edges worry me a little bit. Jalen Harrell, Braden McGregor, those are 2 guys that they have big shoes to fill, and one of them is going to have to step up. This team, I think Michael Barrett's probably going to be your best actual pass rusher from linebacker. I think he's able to generate pressure, but that's my one concern is how are they going to fill the edge need from the last couple of years, because they've had just absolute studs over the last few years.
They've had studs, and then that's where you look at it and you're like, oh, okay, well, what's coming next? Like, how's that look like? But I do think that interior is good enough to kind of help them there. Like, I think now, okay, we have that interior there. And like, I'm a huge fan. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Johnson. I think he's an absolute stud. But I think Jenkins can be that kid that steps up for them. He could have went to the NFL last year, but he didn't. He came back. So that's something to know. I think that they do have that. In a Big Ten, you need that. You need that strong inside rush and that rush defense to stop the run. I mean, talking Wisconsin, these other programs that they're going to be playing. Notable losses, yeah. Mozzie Smith, obviously going to the Cowboys. He's going to be there there. CJ and DJ Turner, edge Mike Norris, Yabi, those guys are good. I like Mozzie Smith, but again, I think that with how strong that defensive line coming back and with Jenkins being there, that limits the Mozzie impact a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think they did a good job filling that. The other concern, I talked about the secondary. DJ Turner was another remarkable player
Yeah.
for them, and I'm not positive that Josh Wallace is going to step in and fill his shoes directly. But I think the combination, Rod Moore being on that same side as Josh Wallace is going to be huge. That kid is one of the best safeties in the country. And so I think that kind of helps. But losing DJ Turner, losing Mozzie Smith, those are pretty notable. But once again, this defense looks like it could. It might, I struggle to say that the ceiling is last year because I think that was one of the better defenses I've seen from Michigan in a while. But I think that this defense is at least close.
Well, I will say, I think the biggest thing I had noted on my notes for Michigan coming into this season, and just knowing them because I'm a fan. Who's their second corner? That's huge. Like, who is that going to be? And they're going to have time. We're going to talk about the schedule. It kind of plays out really well for them to figure out who the hell that second corner is going to be for them and who's going to kind of lay that down. And I do think their linebackers are going to be better because experience. They got exposed against TCU. I think one of the reasons why we lost to TCU is our linebackers, and they got exposed a little bit. So if they develop, I think that we can have that ceiling again where we're like, oh yeah, this team, this defense can lead them there. As far as recruits go, they're always going to do a lot better on the defensive side. They always do this. Hill is one of my favorite prospects, and Hill could be a guy like when we're talking about Hill, like coming in, hey, he's going to be behind some guys, but he might be that impact kid, as we saw last year with Johnson. Like he could come in there 6'1", 170. Again, Cameron Calhoun is another kid that's really good. He's a top 35 at his position, cornerback wise, but overall, like really solid class. Kumba, he's from France, 6'4", 230. So it'd be interesting to see how he's going to kind of put in his kind of how he's going to kind of translate over this year, maybe. He's an early enrollee though, so that's something to note. Etta, like these guys, they did well. These guys are all going to be impact players. I like what they did at the linebacker position. They really went out and kind of did that. But overall, really solid class.
Yeah, hit the defensive line heavy too. I think that's a key part to building this defense out. But I like your point about Jair Hill because, like I just talked about, Will Johnson was one of the most remarkable corners in the country. Just no caveats there. So I think if you can get something from either Hill or Calhoun, I think that would be a big step forward because then you've got three of the better corners. The better group in college football right there. So this is a good class. It's always a good class. Michigan recruits well.
And, Michigan's not dumb. They know they got to get corners because they're going to be playing Ohio State against 17 5-star wide receivers. They know they got to. They got to figure out how to do that. The name to watch out there for Michigan fans, though, Cameron Brandt from Sierra Canyon out here in California. This kid's really good. 6'4", 260, defensive lineman. He could be that next guy. He might be that next guy up. He's not ready. He's 41 overall at his position. But when you watch on the tape, he's got a little wiggle and he's got some strength. And I like what I see from him. He's already kind of developed at that age. So once he just kind of gets it going, gets that coaching, Cameron Brandt's a name to watch as we move forward in the next couple of years. Key transfers, you were taking a shot at my guy Ernest Hausman from Nebraska. Josiah Stewart is another one that I really like him. Ernest coming in as a linebacker, he could give them that linebacker help that they need in terms of if he can get better. I like Josiah Stewart from Coastal Carolina. He came in as a very hot, edge rusher. He might give us that help. Maybe that's the help that we need at that edge. And then Josh Wallace. And I think these three guys are going to be playing a role on this defense. So I think it is something to know about these three.
Yeah, he's going to take the third linebacker role, and he'll be on the field in base sets, but Michigan was a base nickel a lot last year, and so I think he'll be that rotational guy that can get in, and I think that's a good role for him. He struggled at Nebraska, but most people struggled at Nebraska last year, so I don't want to hold too much over his head for that. I think there's a lot of tools there, and if they can kind of coach him up, I think he'll be a good player for them. And like I said, Josh Wallace, good player. It's just living up to DJ Turner is going to be tough. So hopefully the expectation isn't that. Hopefully they understand that that's not what they have in him. But I think he can also be a really good player for this defense. So good group of transfers. They don't have to hit it as hard though, because they didn't lose a whole lot. They had a lot coming back, and they recruit so well that they're in good shape there too.
Yeah. To your point, Josh Wallace, UMass to Michigan's a whole different beast. So that's something that he's gonna have to get into. And I know scouts really like him, and I know but hey, that's still an adjustment. Josiah Stewart, though, I like him because he's only a sophomore coming in, but redshirt sophomore, so he's gonna have some run there. So that's good depth piece for them, and something that they can kind of lean on as the years go. As when Harbaugh leaves next year, which he probably is. But yeah, that's Josiah Stewart there. Now, impact players, Will Johnson might be one of my favorite Michigan players ever at the end of this year. Like, he is just someone that I love watching play. Chris Jenkins Jr. is on here. I think Junior Colson could also step up. We didn't really mention him too much, but middle linebacker is going to step in there. I think he can kind of set the tone for them. Another year of that development. Mason Graham at the nose tackle position. I do think the defensive, Chris Jenkins and Mason Graham, they're the leaders this year. And then Will Johnson on there. How are they going to translate that to everybody else? That's the key in this defense.
Yeah, and I already raved about him, but I'd add Rod Moore to this group because I think when you have a free safety like that, those games against Ohio State are a lot easier, especially when you consider the state of that quarterback room. And I know, I've heard a lot of things about Michigan over the last few weeks, and one of those things is that they don't even care about Ohio. I mean, they care about Ohio State, but their eyes are set on Georgia and a national title. And I think that is a very good mindset to have. The problem is you still have to have the dudes to go beat Ohio State because that is the bar that they've set for themselves. I think Rod Moore, Will Johnson, like this secondary is equipped to do that. So, I mean, I think if Will Johnson takes a step forward, man, he'll be my favorite Michigan player of all time.
He could be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Like, he's heading that way, like in terms of impact player. And that's what you like to see. And that's what you want on your defense if you're Michigan and you're a Michigan fan. That's exactly what you need on that roster. So let's look at the schedule. We're not gonna make fun of the first 4 games, or ECU, UNLV, Bowling Green, Rutgers. Not the murderers row there. I do think that's a good area in terms of getting there. McCarthy set in. I think it's great for Corum to kind of slow play him. Doesn't have to get him out there right away, and it's great for that second cornerback. Hey, who can that be? Then you get Nebraska, who Jeff Sims being there. It's gonna be a different team. And Nebraska's always played Michigan kind of tough. I'll be honest, like. When we think of Nebraska, like they have over years, even last couple of years, you've seen that. So that's something to know at Nebraska. At Minnesota, not a terrible game there versus Indiana. And then really it just comes down to these games. Like at Michigan State, there'll be a little bit, that's a rivalry game, but who knows what's going to happen. Purdue, it's Penn State, Ohio State. Literally Michigan's season comes out of those 2 games. We know that. At Penn State is one of the tougher games on this schedule. And I think that's a scary one. And it is a trap game in there at Maryland. There's always that trap game right before Ohio State, but that's something to know. But overall, I mean, they should be undefeated or 1 loss going to Ohio State game.
Yeah. Penn State's the only one I see as a potential loss here.
That's your team this year. That's your team.
They are. And so the AP poll came out. We're doing these off the ESPN FPI rankings, by the way. And so that's why we're at Michigan now. But the AP poll came out, and Penn State's ranked 7th. And so you're talking about 3 Big Ten East teams being ranked in the top 7. That's one of the better divisions in college football, and it comes down to those last 3 weeks. I think Ohio State gets Penn State a little bit earlier, but it's just, I mean, this division's a little tougher this year, and I think that's why I mentioned putting Georgia as their sights. I think they still need to make sure they focus up for the at Penn State and the versus Ohio State, because I think those are games that if you have your sights too far ahead, you could drop those games and then you don't even get an opportunity. So,
yeah, 100%. So, win totals 10.5. That means they have to beat Penn State, Ohio State. So, where are you going?
Over.
Okay.
I think they lose to Penn State, and I think they beat Ohio State,
which
is different. But that's kind of what I think is going to happen.
All right. I like that. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go over too. I have to go over. I'm a Michigan fan. Yeah. I'm going to go over there. I agree. I think when you're looking at it overall, like I think Penn State, Ohio State are the teams. And how are they going to do there? I just want them to beat Ohio State for a 3rd straight year because, there's nothing sweeter than watching Ohio State fans on social media just freak out.
Ryan Day wouldn't make it out of that either. So it would be program shifting. I think
they can just go back to Urban Meyer. I heard he's available. They can just no, don't do that. He kicked our ass. All right, let's wrap this up. I think for Michigan, this is like the This is it. I think, in terms of like national championship, can you go win it? And I understand they have Jaden Davis coming. They got guys. Like, they're not going to be out of it, especially with the expanded playoff. But this feels like the team. Last year felt like the team that should have played for national title. I wouldn't have put they could beat Georgia. That Georgia team was rolling. But Ohio State almost beat them. So I think there was a shot. This year, though, I do think that there's an opening here. I think Ohio State might be with that quarterback situation the way it is. Georgia's quarterback situation with the way it is. Michigan, if they don't choke, if they don't do the Michigan thing, which they haven't done for the last couple of years, I think that they have the ability to win a national title.
If JJ takes a step forward, I think they are fully capable of doing that. And I think there's a reason we're talking about this team so late. It's, when you combine all the returners, the fact that Blake Corum is even back, I think that alone, just having that leadership back sets this team apart from a lot of those teams that we just mentioned. So I think it's championship or bust. And I think that's a weird spot to be in for you Michigan fans. But I think that's 100% the case, because I do think it will be not quite a few years, but a few years before we're talking about this team, this program like we are right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If we don't win a national title, or if we don't go to the national title game, it's a failure this year. That's how I feel, and that's just how it goes. And that's a great thing. That's a great feeling, rather than like, oh, we played hard against Ohio State. Like, I'm so done with that era of my life. So I'm glad we're in a different era. So appreciate you guys. Let us know, Michigan fans. What do you guys think? Where do you guys think you're gonna finish? And hey, remember, we're with you here. Don't be yelling at me in the comments. I'm a Michigan fan. We got each other's back. So we'll check you guys in the next one. We're getting close to number one. Michigan is definitely underrated on this thing. Don't get me wrong. They should be a top 4 team, but ESPN is ESPN. So appreciate you guys. We'll see you guys next time.